All right. So thank you everyone for coming along to our week 3 community of practice session. My name's Kerry. Lovely to have you all with me today. And we'll have plenty of chance for you to all talk. But let's just do a little bit of an intro. And just to begin, QT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QT now stands. We pay respect to their elders' laws, customs, and creation spirits, and we recognise these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning. QT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QT community. All right, so we've got an hour and a half. I do understand if people can't stay the whole time, that's okay. This is basically what we're going to be doing. But it is all about you. So, we can make adjustments as we go through. I did want to have a couple of little chats. Then we'll get into arguments, and then we can do pretty much whatever you're wanting to do. And just to remember that the main aim of these sessions is to seek feedback and to do a little bit of unpacking together as well of some of the things that we're doing in the activities. So just wondering what you're wanting to gain from today's session. So feel free to pop that in the chat while I just do a little bit of I don't know, a little bit of a pep talk, a little bit of a spiel. But yeah, pop into the chat what you're wanting to do today. So let's start by saying, what the heck is a community of practice anyway? Well, we need 3 elements, which I think we all have, which is a shared domain of interest. So basically, that means we are all sharing wanting to write an article. Sorry, let me just adjust my screen a little bit. So yes, shared domain of interest, which I think we do have. A community of shared activities and collaborative learning. Yep. So we're doing the same activities. We're being collaborative, hopefully, in different ways through our discussions and polls and these sessions. The Q&A we had in week 1, and whatever else surprising opportunities come up as we go through, plus your peer feedback groups. And the third thing is that everybody is a practitioner because we're all in the research field and we're going to interact and share resources. So that's basically the theory that WYJA put out when he was talking about what a community of practice is. He's sort of the seminal author. There's a few others as well. And so the idea is we have this learning environment where we're talking about writing processes, publishing. We're going to hopefully develop some good relationships, and we're going to have some in-depth discussions. And I think what we really saw in week 1, didn't we, was to help normalize and alleviate some anxieties and stress, things like imposter syndrome, which I feel like a lot of us have. And just when you know that there's other people feeling similar ways, I think that can really help us to realize that we're not alone and we are normal, for want of a better word. The other interesting thing I think for us, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in a minute, is that this is an online module. At the moment, we're in person, even though we're over Zoom, we're still talking synchronously. We're all in the room at the same time. So we've got a little bit of both through the module, but most of it is virtual, isn't it? And asynchronous, meaning when people are going in at different times. So I think if we keep the community active, so I'll be helping to facilitate with that and also your engagement as well. So that's why I call it a community of practice, basically, because I think it really fits what we're doing. Just very quickly, the next one of these will be in week 5, then week 7. And I wanted to remind you about the Researcher Feedback Hub. All our participants in WYJA are welcome. Doesn't matter if you're not at QUT. I'm just going to pop into the chat the link for that Zoom. So it is at 8 a.m. on Friday morning. Just quickly, I think we've got right, that's better. Okay, so just wanted to remind you of that researcher feedback hub, which is exactly as it sounds. It's very similar to this. It's a Zoom. You jump in with some writing ready to go, and you seek feedback from the others in the session, including me and our QT Careers, HDR Careers Advisor, Karen Carvu. Okay, that's enough about my side of things for a minute. So in the chat, we had hoping to hear some tips and suggestions for abstract drafting. Interesting. We're actually not talking about abstract drafting today. We're talking about arguments. I feel like it's better not to be ahead of the module activities as such, because I know that often people are still getting into it at the end of the week. So I do apologize about that. Definitely in week 5, we'll be in talking about abstracts. So today it's arguments. Yeah, okay. And again in the chat, good. So here we are, we're into it. What did you take away from weeks 1 and 2? And there's those dot points there are obviously some of our learning objectives. Thank you. Happy to chat about arguments. Good. All right. I'm struggling with creating the writing habit, only have my argument at the moment. Yes, argument is great. That's where we want to be. And a little bit later, have a think if anyone wants to share their argument. We'll be doing that shortly. So again, with this community of practice, a lot of it is building trust and also confidence that no one is judging. I really want you to seek feedback and knowing that we're all in the same position where no one's is perfect. So, there's a bit of bravery, isn't there, in sharing our work because it is so much effort that we've put in and thought, and then for someone to just very quickly say, "Oh yeah, that's not quite right." It can be really hard. But I think that getting used to seeking feedback and, in these kinds of communities, I I think that getting the opportunity to talk to somebody who is giving you the feedback, so rather than you say, "Here's my argument," and then they go, "This is what's good and what's bad," what I want with these sessions is the ability to talk about the feedback further, because that discussion part is really important. It hopefully will make the writer feel a little bit better rather than just seeing that comment where we make up tone, don't we? Where we put extra things into what the person has said. Oh, they hate it. Okay, they haven't said they hate it, but we think that. So that's the other thing about these sessions is when we're together like this in a live version, we have the opportunity to talk to each other about the feedback and what our meanings were, so to speak. All right, anybody else want to talk about anything? Were you surprised about what Belcher said around publishable journal articles, that it's something new about something old, that you aren't necessarily coming up with this new thing that nobody's ever thought about before? Did that make you feel a little bit better about where you're at? I know it did for me, and I really like the idea of your research being another brick in the wall. You're not building the whole wall, okay? um, so you're adding to what everybody else in your field or regarding your topic. I think we had great discussions in week 1. And I noticed when people were talking about the argument tests that often they did provoke some different ideas or perspectives, which is exactly what they're for. Um, in the chat, I'm working on my arguments in my article. Arguing my points is quite problematic, especially finding the appropriate in logical terms. Interesting. So I think already we've got two people who are going to be seeking feedback in a little bit. So that's great. And again, these so what have we got in the chat? Someone has said they're struggling. Someone else is saying it's problematic. Again, noticing these words that are fine to use because that's how you're feeling. Okay, so I think then the seeking feedback side of things will hopefully help you iron out those problems and feel more comfortable about what you're doing. Um, and the other thing in the chat with that I just sort of skirted through, sorry, I'm struggling with creating the writing habit. That's interesting as well. Is anybody else feeling that? I know I certainly feel that regularly. Um, and we did have a lot of strategies, didn't we, in that week one discussion too. So I think again, we're in week three now. If you if that creating of the writing habit is still something that you're working on, think of it like that. I'm still working on this. This is a new thing for me, for you, if that's the case. So yeah, you've got to work out what will work for you, and that may take a little longer. Um, you know, we've already talked about so many strategies, so I think a lot of it is going to be some trials, trial the writing sprints, trial setting your timer. I find when I set the timer on my phone, it goes off and I'm like, oh, I'm not finished yet, so which is good. And again, we with our procrastination, we procrastinate because it's hard, we're unsure. There's so many things that we procrastinate or reasons why. And again, setting the habit and then feeling good once we have that writing session or whatever it may be. So be kind to yourself. It may take a while. Habits can take a little while, but then once we get into them, we can really often, hopefully, see the benefits. Um, in the chat, I found my discussion group thought provoking. I love that. Thank you so much regarding the feedback groups. That's fantastic. Someone else has said, should an argument be limited to 2 or 3 sentences, or is it okay to have a whole paragraph? Get it into 2 and 3 sentences if you can, please. But the rest of the paragraph would be all your evidence, all right? Because remember, with your argument, I wouldn't want citations there. This is your voice, but then you need to provide the evidence. So then under that, you could put your evidence or later on in the article, but initially, remember you're stating the argument very early on. A couple of sentences is good to articulate it. And then, yes, more sentences later as evidence are great. In the chat, someone bought a colorful Pomodoro timer, which I found really helpful and aesthetically pleasing. Yes, I don't know who else likes to have a desk set out the way they want. Mine's a bit of a mess at the moment, and I got a new stand-up desk, so I had to rearrange. But yeah, I love my highlighters. I love my sticky notes. Yeah, cool. So then if you're struggling with the habit, maybe you need a quick trip to Kmart for some cheap and fun stationery. That could be something you could do. Good. That's a really great idea. All right, keep on coming with these things about weeks 1 and week 2 while I keep going. So we're doing this right now. I just wanted to really quickly bring this quote up. I hope maybe I've talked about it before. I know I didn't in the Q&A in week 1, but if I have, sorry. But I really love it. Learning to talk about writing is an important key to becoming a productive writer. So this is what we've already been doing in the session now. We're going to continue to do it. Hopefully you've been doing it in your peer feedback groups. But yeah, it's interesting, I think, because it's not intuitive. to talk about writing, is it? Because writing is something we do on our own, potentially collaborating at some stages and seeking feedback. But the majority of the time, it's us in our head. Different for me because this is my job to talk about writing. But what about you? How do you feel? Is this something new? Is this something that you think, oh, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense? Or are you still a little bit reluctant because you think, oh, what could I have to add? Although you do have plenty to add because you have your own experiences. But any thoughts on this one?
Carrie, I wasn't sure if you wanted us in the chat or not.
Either way,
Okay.
do whatever
I'm
you
trying
like.
not to the
Remember, I'm recording, so you're happy to be on the recording.
That's fine. I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges in terms of, yeah, that writing and talking about it is, yeah, that kind of wanting it to be a level of perfect that logically you know it doesn't need to be, but kind of puts that pause in for you. I think that's something I struggle with.
Yeah, yeah. And as I said, it's showing off something that we're not actually sure is okay. It's very different to saying, oh, here's my baby. Isn't he or she gorgeous? Or do you like my new sweater? Or my new dress. It's quite a different thing to say, oh, here's my argument. What do you think? Um, yeah, and also because it's complex, is anyone else going to really be interested in my topic? There's all of these things that we start to think about as well. So I guess that and it's not actually also always about the actual writing. It's what we've already been talking about regarding getting the habits and getting into the good practice. And does my argument need to be 2 to 3 sentences? Or, I find feedback challenging to seek or whatever it may be. So, I feel like we're doing this. I hope that your confidence will increase in doing this. And one of the people that I'd really love you to talk a bit more to about writing would be your supervisors. So it's almost a lot of things about writing is implicit, meaning it's not explicit, right? Because we're doing it, ourselves. But have you talked to your supervisors about their writing habits and their writing processes? Because that would be interesting. And they probably haven't really thought about it potentially, particularly if you were to say, well, what's your strategy when you want to get started on a research article? That would be interesting, I think, to find out. And again, there's no right or wrong. So if they're doing things that we haven't talked about or anything, that's completely fine. Um, but yes, I'm hoping that these sessions and in your groups and through the module that this is something, because I think a lot of us don't really like writing that much. There was some discussion in week 1 around some people did like it, some people didn't like it. But in the end, the writing is how you're going to put your research out there. So talking about it as well in a nice way, in a non-judging way, I think is really useful. All right. And then just very quickly, this the peer feedback groups are a great idea. Um, but I think one of the issues that we have, which Ola and I work very hard to address, is the fact that they are asynchronous, the opposite to what we're doing now. So the image there, everybody's in the room, they've got their laptops, their pens, their coffees, their juice, and they're ready to go and they're face to face. So these groups are asynchronous, and I think a lot of the problems or the challenges are purely because of that platform. So again, would love to know, how are you going? I know somebody's already said that they've had a good experience so far. I've had a couple of people reach out to say their groups are really quiet. So we may have to move them into another group, which does happen sometimes. But What are your thoughts on this around the idea of the asynchronous groups, where again, as I said, you are popping your argument into a Canvas discussion area and it sits there, and maybe somebody will come and say something about it, maybe they won't. So it's a little bit of a weird situation, isn't it?
Um, Harry, can you
Yep,
hear me clearly? I've
I
just taken,
can.
oh, good, because I just took my headset off. Um, I found the group really, really helpful. Um, and I found um, that when I put my argument up, I asked specifically
Yay.
for them to look in a certain way at it. And then the feedback I got was really specific. And people, some of the group members even highlighted a sentence that they wanted to respond to and bring to my teaching, and that was really helpful. It was so helpful, Carrie, that my argument has actually changed. So yeah,
All
it's
right.
good. It's
Well,
good.
thank you for sharing. That is a fantastic tip regarding saying, here's my argument. This is what I'm potentially, wanting to know about that I'm not sure about. Or what do you think about this? Is it clear? Can you understand each of these concepts or whatever it is? So that's great. That is exactly the kinds of strategies we should always be using when we request feedback. It's feedback literacy is a dialogue, isn't it? It's not always in person like this. Sometimes it's asynchronous, like in your groups. Sometimes it's you send something to your supervisor, they come back with written feedback. So if you can get a good mix of asynchronous, in person, um, and the written feedback, but also be able to discuss the written feedback sometimes, that's all going to help with all the aspects of your feedback literacy and, of course, your drafts and your writing practices as well. Thank you for sharing, Millie. That's so good. Um, the other thing is, I was planning on potentially making new groups for week 5, but I am thinking, because I've already had a few people say they're working well, I think what we might do is, because we're in week 3 now, yeah, so mm, what we might do is send out another survey like that first one with an option of, I want to stay with the group I'm in. I think that might be the go. So leave that one with me. Please feel free to email myself or Ola with anything. If you do want to go into a different group, we can do that. But I would, if everything's working well, it seems a pity to pull you apart. So, yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Please, as I said, we don't have to stop talking about these groups right now. Feel free to contact me or Ola with any suggestions, or if you want to be moved or anything like that. All right. So we have got some activities to do around writing arguments, but I also wanted to give you the opportunity now that if you didn't want to do that, maybe there's something else that you would like to do. All right. Just another comment about the peer feedback groups. I found them rewarding and informative. I learned how my group members structure their writing and arguments. Nice. And initiate an argument which provokes thinking outside of the box. I love that. Okay. Excellent. All right. Let's do a quick revision on what we've been looking at this week. And honestly, this idea of the argument is so, so important. And it's also important, of course, in your thesis as well. So, a well-crafted argument states the single significant idea you want to prove, right? So, that's where your couple of sentences come in, and then supported by reasons and evidence. And that's all the rest of your information that'll come basically in the form of the literature review in a lot of ways. Okay. Now, it's a strategy of inquiry when we talk about an argument. All right. So just to notice that inquiry um, in British English, we inquiry with an I means we're referring to formal investigations, which is what you're doing, a formal investigation of a research problem, right? So the terminology that says you need to have an argument, that argument is based on the research problem, okay? So the argument is, hey, there's this research problem and we need to gain insight into it for these reasons. And then also, as we said, you're one brick in the wall. And you're going to probably continue refining as you progress through. So that's all right. And as you saw, there's a lot more information in the module. Okay. All right. One of the things that is important when we use exemplars is that they generally won't be in your field of study. However, one of your activities this week was to peruse and analyze abstracts from your target journal or the kinds of journals that you're getting a lot of your reading from. So, of course, they will be much more aligned. All right. But you can still get benefit even if it's outside of your field. So let's have a look at some arguments. And I'm happy for you to turn on your mics or add in the chat because this is not just about what I see. Okay. What do you see? Because we're all going to have different perspectives and that's okay. There's a few different ways we could go. Hopefully you've had a little bit of a read through one or two of them. But let's go through them together. All right. We'll only take about 15 minutes and then we'll break up into our groups so we have plenty of time. So while we're looking, so we are looking at abstracts, but we want to find the argument. All right. So looking at this one, do you see an argument? It's interesting to also pull out the title. What do you think? Post-earthquake fire is considered one of the most high-risk and complicated problems affecting buildings in urban areas and can cause even more damage than the earthquake itself. Interesting, huh? However, most standards and codes ignore the implications of post-earthquake fire, and buildings are not normally designed with post-earthquake fire in mind. What is needed is for factors to be routinely scrutinized and codified as part of the design process. A systematic application is presented as a means of mitigating the risk of post-earthquake fire in urban buildings. What do you think? Is there an argument in there?
I feel like it's more stating a problem rather than arguing something.
Is it this? So this looks like the problem, doesn't it? Well, actually, that's the problem. So I guess what is needed? What do you think about that? Is that wording that would indicate an argument? Is that, and again, we need to remember the field of study here and the journal, risk research. That's interesting. So there's all different ways. And also look how short this abstract is. Yep. Any thoughts? Go ahead.
I guess from the point of view of the fact that it's an abstract, does an abstract usually start with the particular argument or give you the background first, like they've done?
Yep. No, should give some background, right? Post-earthquake is most high risk and complicated problems. I would probably, yeah. So look, all the words are there. Post-earthquake fire, high risk, and urban. So I like that. Okay. That is linking to the title. And then straight away, have a look at that word. That's a good word. However, we have a problem, but we are going to come up with a solution. See how arguments can be different ways, is what I'm sort of saying. And I think this is fine. But so as a reader, obviously this isn't our field of study. So we're not going to go and be like, oh, going to go and read this whole thing. However, what we're unpacking here is it clear what the study is about and why it would be important, and even stakeholders, right? So there is some so the stakeholders here, inhabitants, they seem important to me. So again, we don't need to overthink, but however, most standards and codes ignore the implications of post-earthquake fire, and buildings are not normally designed with this in mind. To me, that seems like a problem. Now, we don't know where the research setting is for this either, to actually. But I would say it must be fairly global. I could be wrong though. And then they say, what is needed? And my assumption is that they're going to do something around here, codify, right? So systematic is presented as a means of mitigating, yeah, and this is what they're going to do. So it's okay. Yeah, go. Yeah.
So Carrie, I'm following what you're saying, and that's how I'm reading it as well. I think for an abstract like this that I don't understand at all what the topic is about, often what I do is I look for that claim, like what are they claiming is significant? What is it that they are saying? This is so important. You have to pay attention to this. And I think you pointed out there, yes. Just what you've highlighted there, and it's in the title as well. I think that risk, mitigation.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, so that's really great. What you're saying is that's what you're looking for, is the impact, the contribution, or why do we care? So what? And that caught my eye, that the fires can cause more damage than the earthquake itself. That was like, oh, okay, that seems bad. So, so I think it's pretty good. In the chat, it identifies a neglected problem, yep, and proposes a solution, yeah, yep. And as I said, there is so many different ways we can approach the writing of the argument and the writing of the abstract, So these are just examples, and see what we think about them, and if there's any strategies that we might use or not. Okay, this is one of my favorite ever articles. Australian magpies cooperate to remove tracking devices. Interesting. Now, look at this. Australian field ornithology This is a very specific audience, okay? Probably the most specific that you could get. There's not too many of us that are probably reading this journal, but I bet that there's a whole lot of people that are. All right, let's have a look. Recent advances in tracking technologies have enabled devices such as global positioning systems, loggers, such as global positioning systems loggers, to be used in a wide variety of birds. I think that means you're logging their global positioning. Although there are established ethical considerations, different species may react differently. Thus, pilot studies are of utmost importance. Here, we describe one such study trialing a novel harness design on Australian magpies. I'm not going to say the Latin. Despite previous testing demonstrating the strength and durability of the harness, devices were removed within minutes. Notably, removal was observed to involve one bird snapping another bird's harness at the only weak point, so the tracker was released. This behavior demonstrates cooperation and problem solving and further evidence of the cognitive abilities of this species. To our knowledge, this is the first study to report the conspecific removal of GPS trackers and should be considered when planning future tracking studies. So you can imagine they put these on the people, and within minutes they were cooperating to get them off. It's pretty cool. Righto, what are we seeing? Again, I want to highlight wording. Although, so straight away, this is highlighting a problem, right? Although there are established ethical considerations, different species may react differently, right? So this is sort of, could we say, this is kind of the problem or the argument. I think it's part of the argument as to why we need these different studies, right? Because look at their next sentence. Right, different species react differently, so we need pilot studies, which they've done. Okay, so they're putting their argument forward as to why we care about this. Why do we need this pilot study? Look at this wording, despite. Okay, so again, setting up that there's something not quite right. Despite previous testing demonstrating the strength and durability of the harness, devices were removed within minutes. Removal was observed, la la la. This behavior demonstrates Right. So we've got to basically make sure we take this into account. All right. So doesn't matter what I think. What do you think? Is there an argument? Do you think the main argument is this one? The fact that we've done a pilot study and we're going to tell you about it, and we need pilot studies, and our pilot study proved we need pilot studies.
I think that's the argument, Kerry.
Yeah. I think this is interesting that they've raised the ethical considerations. And when you go in to the article, they talk about the fact that the ethical considerations are, these are birds. They need to have something very light on their legs, their skinny little legs, or wherever they did. They put them on their legs, I'm pretty sure. What do you call bird legs? I don't know. Anyway, so they have to be small and they have to be light. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fly, right? So again, that's also bringing back to why we need these pilot studies as well. So yeah, it's a lot of it is about the aim, isn't it? Is the sentence beginning this behavior? Yeah. Yes. Definitely that's part of it. Because of this, right? This is why we need the pilot studies. Yes. And the species-specific response as well. Yes, absolutely. So it's all part of it, isn't it? But again, if we were to say, what's the key sentence in here as far as the argument, I think it would be this one. Thus, pilot studies are still of utmost importance because they're reporting a pilot study. And that reporting of it, all of this, so they did test it, the strength and durability, but something went wrong because this species is smart. So a lot of it is building towards, what their findings will be and why we need the pilot study. So again, pretty interesting one. How many of these do we have? Oh gosh, a few more. That's okay. We can go fast. All right. I like this one. This lady is my jam. Developing a community of research practice. British Educational Research Journal, pretty high up. Not sure if it's Q1, but yeah, developing a community of research practice. Oh, that's what we're doing. Writing journal articles is essential for academics and professionals to develop their ideas, make an impact in their fields, and progress in their careers. Research assessment makes successful performance in this form of writing more important. This article describes a course on writing journal articles, wow, and draws on interviews with participants 1 year after the course in which they identified persistent challenges. Ooh. So they went and did a course and they're still having persistent challenges around what? The writing processes are tacit, meaning we can't feel them. And key writing strategies. Sorry, tacit is we can feel them. Sorry, it was around the wrong way. So basically they're saying, these interviews really enabled us to dig down and figure out what these barriers are and why they've still got these persistent challenges. There's this word, however. Interesting. So these barriers are in their academic workplaces and professional places. Yeah, this article concludes by suggesting that while research assessment values written outputs over almost everything else, it's important to legitimize the process and articulate the development in communities of research practice. So that's what I think her argument is, but this is a pretty difficult one, I think. So here's our topic, writing journal articles, right? So where do we get to the community of research practice? I would guess that that's this bit because they did the course on writing journal articles, but still having challenges a year later.
Carrie, I found that with the other two abstracts, the argument came quite soon, whereas this one's come towards the end.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, that's a little bit weaker, perhaps. Like I'm reading, however, right at the end. I would have liked to have read that right at the beginning. Some processes are really visible. However, there are barriers. So the importance of the subject doesn't jump at me. I don't feel like they're making a very effective claim.
Yep, I agree, but she's my hero. And again, she's prolific as well. So what is the point of this, showing you this one, is that again, it depends on the field of study and it depends on the writer themselves. I mean, this has been published, right? So as of all these ones that we see, but we will see often articles where we're like, I'm not quite sure, but it's been through the peer review and it's been published. So again, my aim in this is to make you feel more confident and be like, okay, I don't need to find this perfection. as long as the people that read the British Educational Research Journal or the peer reviewers for that journal are like, okay, this is an important topic, we'll publish this. But yeah, I agree with you. We don't even see the words community of research practice until there, right? So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Now, for me, I'm interested in this idea of the process of writing journal articles, obviously. So I'm captured by it anyway. But if this is not your field of study, yeah, I can see how you'd sort of be like, okay, hang on, what's she talking about exactly? Yeah, interesting again. All right, let's just do this one, and then I want us to get into our breakouts. The reason why is this is a scoping review, and I know some people are doing scoping reviews. It is quite a long one, so we'll just quickly go through it. But again, look at this: characteristics and outcomes of adults presenting to the emergency department. So the scope, we've got adults in there, we've got emergency department in there, and then look how it begins as a result of climate change. But then the rest of it, then we get on to the idea of human health. Okay, so that's pretty good. This is a reasoning, we've got this increase in frequency and intensity and the impacts. EDs are often the critical point of care. Yeah, should we have had emergency departments in there? Maybe, but it was up here, I guess. So, the emergency medicine. I think everyone's in that audience is going to know what ED is. We've got a gap, I guess. So we're increasing frequency, and the EDs are the critical point of care. This scoping review aim to do these things. So then they've said how they did it. They did a retrospective case analysis, la, 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 la. Right, look at that. So we had to wait to the end, didn't we? Again. There's some data. 18.5 times risk. So again, look at our audience, look at what the scoping review is wanting to do, and it doesn't really say that in here, but I'm sure they do later on. But basically, there's obviously a little bit of a gap between where no one's really done this before, right? Why else would we need the scoping review? And kind of makes sense for the outcomes to be down here, but I feel like this could be, or at least this sentence, I feel like that could have been up in here, right? Heat waves resulting from will place increasing demands providing care for increasingly susceptible populations, although maybe they've said that, frequency and intensity. Interesting again. All right, let's get into our groups. I think we should do that now.